everyone, and welcome to another video. I'm Simply G, and today I'm going to be talking about some manga that I'd like to spotlight for Pride. I've previously done a video like this a couple years ago now at this point, and whilst that is a good video, there's still titles in there that I would definitely recommend for people. If you are wanting some queer representation in your manga, it is a little bit out of date because happily, fortunately, over the last 2 years, we've gotten a lot more LGBT manga. Not only in regards to like BL and Yuri, but stuff that actually focuses on some of the other diverse identities under the LGBT umbrella. So, rather than spend too long on this intro, I'll get straight into it. I hope you guys enjoy. We're going to start with some Yuri titles, the first one being a 7 Seas title and an ongoing title from Asumiko Nakamura. In my previous video, I also featured one of her titles. That was a BL. This one is ongoing and is a white rose in bloom. This is the story. It's an S-class Yuri, somewhat. It's the story of 2 teenage girls who are going to a boarding school. One who is quite standoffish. She's regarded as very cool by all of her classmates. She's very well put together and a little bit unapproachable. And our main character is somewhat the opposite. She's more personable, she's more outgoing, but she also has a very, very complicated relationship with her parents. She's going through a lot of difficult family issues. And so one day when the two of them are left to spend their winter break at this boarding school, they're pretty much the only students left at the school, they grow closer, and from that grows some feelings. But because of, again, the complicated relationship that both of these girls have with the people around them, their circumstances, their backgrounds, it takes a little while for them to kind of figure things out, and it's not immediately obvious. Like, this isn't really a series that jumps straight to a confession and then, happily ever after. There's some drama that goes along with it. Like with Nakamura's other title that I mentioned in my previous Manga for Pride video, I really love her art style. It's so beautiful and striking and so atmospheric. There's some gorgeous sequences in this particular book that just capture your attention, and you can feel the chemistry between these characters. Even if you're not a fan of like S-class Yuri, which personally I'm not, I don't think this really feels too much like the classic S-class stuff that is very prolific within the Yuri genre. But definitely give it a look. I highly recommend any of Nakamura's works. And this one being the first of, well, she's had kind of a Yuri release previously in English, but this is her first, like, straight up, obviously Yuri title that we've gotten in English, and I was very excited when it was licensed, and even more excited when I was able to read it, and of course I just fell in love. Give it a shot. Another ongoing title, another 7 Seas title, and another creator that was mentioned in my previous Manga for Pride video, and this is Takako Shimura's Even Though We're Adults, which is an ongoing drama about 2 adult women who, after a night out drinking, they meet each other at a bar, kind of coincidentally, but they really hit it off. They spend a night together, but the next morning they wake up and have to go back to their normal lives. And for one of our characters, that's fine. She's single, she's gay, she's never had much luck with romance, but she doesn't have any personal issues that are preventing her from pursuing this relationship. But the other woman is actually, not only is she a teacher, which in Japan kind of means that there's some stigma for being queer in that situation, but she's also married to a man. And previously to this, she never really had an attraction to women, or not one that she really acknowledged. And it's not that she was unhappy with her marriage either. Her husband seems like a pretty normal kind of, like, normal guy, nice guy. They don't fight. There's no real imminent relationship trouble that would, push her to want to cheat on him or anything like that. But the immediate connection, the chemistry that these two have, and obviously the lowered inhibitions that comes with drinking, means that she did explore this part of herself, and now she's kind of reassessing her priorities. And I think it's a really, although it's full of drama, it's certainly not like, again, a feel-good, there's a confession and they live happily ever after sort of story. I do think that this really does, as it says in the title, focus on the messiness that comes with adult relationships and responsibilities. And I do think that for such a complicated and nuanced situation, especially with regards to our bisexual character, who again has a pretty good relationship with her husband. She doesn't have any like marital strife, but also doesn't want to dismiss this potential budding relationship with this woman, and how she approaches that, and how she keeps both parties in the loop in her personal conflict. And then again, her husband, like, having all of this dropped on his lap and being like, oh, what did I do? Why is my life was so simple before this? But them all, I mean, adults are as messy and as dramatic as anyone, right? You don't automatically become, able to handle this sort of situation by a certain age. But the fact that there is this open communication somewhat, and there's this effort to involve everyone and to make sure that everybody's involved in the conversation, is something that comes with more maturity, with a bit more life experience. And then of course we have our lesbian character, who has her own previous hang-ups over bad experiences dating bisexual girls, and sort of the fear, I guess, that's inherent with, which is obviously rooted in biphobia, but the assumption that a bisexual woman or man will kind of quote unquote go straight and then settle for a partner of the opposite sex because it's easier and you're more able to kind of subsist within society without too many odd looks, anything like that. So it, again, it's playing into that inherent personal fear, but then rooted in this larger biphobia. And I think the way that she recognizes that in herself as well is really well handled. So this is still ongoing. No idea how it's going to end, but I'm a big fan of Takako Shimura, and this is another one that's really good. Definitely worth a read if you're wanting to give it a shot. For the Yuri, another 7 Seas release, which is somewhat unsurprising, although many, many, many of our manga publishers in the English market are releasing Yuri now. It's not just 7 Seas, but they still definitely dominate the market, and a lot of my favorite stuff is coming out of this publisher. This is a completed series in 3 volumes. It is absolutely tailored to my personal tastes, and I wanted to include this one because it's a little bit of a genre piece as well, and that is Goodbye My Rose Garden, a 3-volume series completed in English and Japanese, obviously, written by Dr. Pepperco. This is the story of a Japanese woman who, after being inspired by a English author, decides to move to England. And this is, the late 19th century. So this is a historical piece, a historical drama, or a historical romance. She moves to England in order to pursue her dreams of becoming an author herself. But she's although she knows English, she is very obviously foreign. She doesn't really have any connections within the publishing industry, and there's a stigma of women, being authors as well, especially in regards to publishing certain genres too. So although she's trying to find a publisher or connect as well with her favorite author, she kind of hits a roadblock. But when she's there, her story is overheard, or her pleading is overheard by a young woman named Alice, who is the very obviously Western woman on the front cover here, who is there for her own reasons, and she offers our main character a job as like a maid. In her home, she's a very well-to-do young lady. She's part of a very wealthy family, and with that, of course, comes social expectations. So our main character, I think her name is Hanako, takes her up on that offer, namely because she wants a reason, or she needs some way to support herself in England if she's wanting to continue to pursue her various goals in the country. So she becomes initially just like a maid within this household, but very quickly the personal maid to Alice herself. And she learns that this woman that she's befriended has a very she doesn't fit into a lot of people's expectations of her. Being of a certain social class, it's expected, she's betrothed to someone, it's expected she'll marry and have children and yada yada yada. But there are rumors going about that she is in fact gay and is interested in women, and shock horror, that's not allowed. And because of this, and because of Alice's own fear of letting down or disappointing her family, bringing shame to her family, she has very dark feelings about herself. She's somewhat suicidal. She really doesn't expect things to go well for herself, and so when she does grow closer to our main character, she asks her if she would kill her. And in order to kind of prevent that, but also understand where Alice is coming from, Hanako agrees, but not immediately. And over time, over the course of the series, the two grow closer, and ultimately, this is a love story. It's also a happy ending. It's very well put together in the 3 volumes. I'm a big historical romance nerd, a historical fiction fan anyway, romance or not. But this is a very, very good entry into the series, and I think it deals with this societal homophobia of the time period as the main, quote-unquote villain of the piece very well. I think it, obviously, when it comes to queer romance especially, there is a tendency to lean on homophobia or use homophobia as an excuse as to why characters can't get together, or initially try to ignore or not want to get involved with each other. They don't think that their romance will be able to persist. But I think it fits well into this particular series very, very well. And I also think that it's somewhat less common to see that sort of story trope or that sort of theme in Yuri versus BL, as Yuri tends to be a little bit more within a bubble of where homophobia doesn't quite exist or isn't recognized or isn't as much of a hurdle comparatively to BL, where a lot of stories do focus on that aspect. I really love the series. It's beautiful. It's got a great relationship. It's just overwhelmingly wonderful in the 3 volumes, and is very satisfying within those 3 volumes as well. And yeah, definitely give it a shot if you haven't read it yet. A couple of BL titles, the first one being another 7 Seas series. This is a single volume, one and done book. Really, really lovely, really sweet, really great for people who are not that well versed in BL. It's a very approachable little series, and being complete in 1 volume is also not a huge time investment or money investment. And that is Our Dining Table by Mita Ori. This is the story of 2 young men who coincidentally meet. One who has great personal issues and trauma in regards to food and eating, especially with other people, who's kind of forced to befriend this other young man and his much younger brother, when said younger brother praises the delicious food that he's given or is shared from our main character. And so very quickly they decide to, well, they become friends, but they also decide to start making meals together because the younger brother is very picky. There's been a recent loss in the family, and the older brother's had a real hard time trying to make food for his younger brother without him, not dismissing it or having an issue with it. And through this kind of unceremonious or unexpected relationship and connection, the two, of course, grow closer, and then romance develops. But not only that, it allows our main character to confront his own trauma in regards to eating, and the relationship he has with his family, and the relationship he has with meals, and this idea of meals and food connecting people, and meal times being a time to connect with others and to check in on others. It's really sweet, really lovely, just incredibly heartwarming, very, very cute. And again, at a single volume, it's not a huge time investment or money investment. It's one that just really warms your heart and is really, really, really good. So I definitely recommend it. Next is probably the most well-known title in this list. It is hugely popular thanks to a recent anime adaptation, and the manga is just as good. Ongoing, currently from Sublime, and that is Given by Natsuki Kizu. This is the story of 4 band members, namely the 2 teenage characters who meet, again, kind of run into each other at school, and who, after kind of initial prickly introductions, grow closer after one asks the other to teach him how to play guitar, because he has a guitar, but he's never played it, and it's a very important item to him. After kind of agreeing to this, and after a certain period of time, our other teenage character introduces this other guy to the band that he's a part of. They're just like a, indie little, very unprofessional group that he's formed with 2 university students, a bass player and a drummer, who have their own drama, relationship drama with each other, but then also with other people. And this, I don't feel like Given needs a huge introduction because it is so popular. The anime is very well regarded and is a great adaptation as well. But this story really deals with grief and trauma and toxic relationships and cycles of returning to toxic situations and people, and how especially in regards to the adult characters or the university aged characters in this series, you have this real genuine and deep rooted emotional attachment to someone and love for someone, but recognizing that although you care about this person and although you both, and no matter how much you care about that person, it can still be a bad situation, and the best thing that you can do for the both of you is to leave that situation and to find other people who let you be your best self, help you to become, you know, a more happy, more well-rounded person. And of course, you know, the younger characters, we have guilt and grief and overcoming the loss of somebody who was your whole world, losing someone you love, but also finding new love, having a new beginning and not clinging to the past, which is a really good parallel between the two couples, quote unquote. It's so good. It's so good. Again, I don't think this series needs a huge introduction because most people who know it know that it's good. Hopefully you've watched the anime as well, because that's also really good. Music definitely helps. But it's just beautifully done. I really also appreciate this one and wanted to include this one because although it does have relationship drama, it's the sort of real life, realistic, very applicable, very relatable human drama that comes with relationships, that's outside of the typical like tropey BL yaoi drama, things that people criticize, you know, BL from the 90s, like 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It doesn't have those toxic tropes, but it still talks about and explores toxicity, if that makes sense. Given is phenomenal, and I absolutely recommend it if you haven't given it a shot. A one and done, like, single volume title from Tokyo Pop. Obviously, in my opinion, there's some morality, like, choices that people make as consumers of Tokyo Pop's titles, but I will say that they do have a really great range of BL in their love line, many of which I love and highly recommend if you are someone who is willing to support Tokyo Pop in their current self. So this is There Are Things I Can't Tell You by Erako Mofumofu. This is the story of two childhood friends in high school. They've known each other for many, many years. I think they're in high school. Maybe they're in university now. Regardless, they're older. They've known each other forever. And one who is a closeted gay man, and the other who is also a closeted gay man, but because of our main character's internalized homophobia and fear of being rejected by his family, he's kind of pushed away this other guy, his best friend, because he recognizes, he recognizes his romantic feelings for this other boy. He also recognizes that this other boy has romantic feelings for him, but because of that he knows that his family are homophobic and would never kind of support him, and the way that his family has spoken about gay people in the past, he's internalized this fear, and also internalized this idea that being gay is wrong, and so he's rejected his feelings for his childhood best friend, and subsequently said best friend has kind of fallen into a long-term, like, on-again, off-again relationship with a woman who's so he's kind of chasing love and fulfillment from somebody who he knows will never actually reciprocate for him, because there's a whole other drama going on there, but she's kind of trying to find something with her relationship with this guy that she's not getting from her husband, and like all this stuff. Anyway, but it's really good. If you don't mind that kind of mild cheating aspect of it, it's not really our main characters who are doing that, first off. I thought this was a good one to include because I did like how the internalized homophobia aspect was shown and challenged and broken out of with our characters, and this struggle of accepting yourself when you're so afraid of losing people who you care about and who you would hope cares about you. Because obviously homophobia isn't just something that is it's not just heterosexual people who are homophobic, right? There's a lot of, because of the society that we live in, because of ideas of toxic masculinity and inherent generational homophobia, and the way that parents and grandparents and extended family members talk about and have talked about queer issues, and knowing that your family is not going to support you if you come out, things like that, and thus hating yourself or not accepting yourself fully is definitely that's a thing, right? It definitely is something that affects a lot of people, certain groups of people especially, and even people who are they might have allies in one aspect of their life, or people who are accepting of gay people but don't necessarily understand trans issues or bisexuality, things like that, who may be bigoted in some other sense. I think it's something that is both outside and inside the community, and hopefully you grow out of that, you become more comfortable with yourself, with other people, with how people choose to live their lives, especially if you're not hurting anyone, do what you want to do, live your best life, right? That's always been my idea and something that I live by. And so for this, I thought it was really, I'm a big sucker for childhood friends to lovers anyway. This was probably always going to be on my radar, but I thought it really surprised me with how nuanced the relationship was, and their personal complicated feelings, but then also the romanticism of that, breaking out of that, growing more confident with each other and with yourself, with the help of that person who you care about, with the person that cares about you and accepts you for who you are, regardless of what wider society or family or friends may think. I think it's just really lovely. Although it is kind of it can be hard, and this one is a little bit more confronting than some of the other titles that I've talked about in this video, but I do think that those difficult, complicated emotions and situations are handled really, really well. And yeah, also this one is also it given has a little bit of spiciness later on in certain volumes. This one does end with explicit scenes, so fair warning for that. So yeah, if that doesn't faze you and it sounds like something you might be interested in, give it a shot. Finally, for the BL, we have another Tokyo Pop title. This is an ongoing series, and one that very quickly joined my favorites for BL that I've read recently. And this is Mone Sorai's Our Not So Lonely Planet travel guide. This is the story of a gay couple who are taking a world trip. They're going, globe-trotting, as it were, and visiting a whole bunch of different countries, with the promise that when they get back to Japan, they will get married, right? And there's some implication from conversations and, you know, flashbacks and things like that throughout the course of the series and throughout this first volume that these two, they've been dating for a while now, but it's only due to one of them having a pretty major health scare that they're more willing to challenge themselves and to also be open about their relationship, not hide it away. Because for one of these characters especially, he's still closeted to his family and friends and work associates, I would assume. And so he has a lot more hang-ups when it comes to being overtly publicly affectionate with his partner, and the struggle that and the hurt that can have to his partner, who is very much more this publicly affectionate person, but is aware of, you know, his partner's hang-ups and his fears of whatever, of being judged. And we also get insight to, they've known each other for a long time. They were classmates, or, you know, they were in the same school for a while. But they weren't friends. But despite that, they were always somewhat drawn to each other. There's the assumption that they reconnected after university or whatever, and have since acted on their feelings that they'd been harboring somewhat since high school. And for a couple years, or for however long that period was, they were very happy with just being, you know, having their relationship to themselves, them knowing that they care about each other and not having to tell anyone else about it, for a while, until again this health scare has kind of encouraged them to be and pushing them to be their more genuine self to other people, even if it does mean that they lose family or friends or whatever else, insofar as that they don't have to hide who they are anymore. And this is a travelogue. Each chapter is a different country. So in this particular volume, they visit Thailand, they visit India, they visit and Georgia, the country, not the state, obviously. So they've been going through Southeast Asia. And the first chapter is them leaving Japan, right? So it's just, I'm a big fan of travelogue anyway. I'm a bit of a traveler myself, and so it was really cool seeing some places that I've been to, for one, but also seeing how much love has been put into exploring these different cultures, but also watching these two interact. They're definitely like an opposites attract kind of personalities, but despite that, how strong their relationship is. In addition to that, there's kind of a well-proven saying that if you can survive a trip, an international vacation with somebody, then you're really, you know, then that relationship will survive anything, because traveling can be very high stress. You can see people at their absolute worst because, you know, you can get lost, or there's, you know, things can go wrong, or things don't stick to schedule, and almost never, you know, you might have plans, but those plans are never going to work out, and you're outside of your normal comfort zone, and that's when you really learn about another person. And so experiencing the world together, leaving their small bubble of their lives, and leaving a pretty conservative society like Japan, which does still in a lot of places have some very old-fashioned or bigoted views on homosexuality, is still a couple steps behind other places in the world with regards to LGBT rights. Experiencing the world and experiencing more, just learning about other cultures, and through that becoming more self-assured. And I think that's just so wonderful. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first place that they travel to is Thailand, which is somewhat famous for kind of queer rights and various gender identities, and embracing all sorts of genders and sexualities, and has done culturally forever, right? And the sheer stark difference that and impact that that's had for these characters kind of out of the gate, comparatively to them being like closeted and hiding their relationship and hiding their identity in Japan, is just really, really wonderfully done. And then we have some later drama in regards to one of our characters runs into an ex-girlfriend, and sort of some of that drama that comes out of that, not being able to, the communication issues that comes out of that, and obviously when you're being self-aware and not having the confidence to say like, oh yes, I'm gay, or yes, I'm bisexual and I'm dating this person, the then kind of complicated conversations that can come up, or can't be avoided, when it comes to meeting people who were previously like partners, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever else. It's really good, really lovely. I cannot wait for volume 2. And yeah, give it a shot if you haven't. Next, we get another 7 Seas book. 7 Seas is really at the forefront of like LGBT manga licensing. This is a completed series in Japan, not currently in English. I think there's 2 or 3 volumes out right now. But this is Love Me for Who I Am by Kata Konoyama, volume 1 of 5. This is the story of a young non-binary teenager who is not struggling with their identity per se, but struggling with the lack of understanding of their identity. They're looking for a community. And coincidentally, one of their classmates, a young teenage guy, he sees Mogumo, our main character, who's on the front here, at like outside of school, and recognizes that they are not, cisgen, or well, recognizes that there's probably some sort of sexual identity, something going on there. And so he decides to introduce Mogumo to a cafe that his older sister runs, who is a trans woman, which is why this, teenage boy was kind of aware that other gender identities and things existed. And because initially he thinks that Mogumo is a trans woman, which they're not. But he's wanting to help them find community. And so this is a cafe where all of the wait staff are boys dressed as girls, or boys dressed as maids, right? And that's very, it leans into fetish, but it also, for many of the individual wait staff, is a way for them to explore themselves or express their gender identity or their sexuality. So we have a couple different characters. And so not only is there Mogumo, who is this non-binary teen, but we also have a trans girl. We also have a gay guy, and also a presumably cisgendered heterosexual guy, who just likes dressing up as a girl every so often. And so although this classmate introduces Mogumo to and helps Mogumo get a job here, with the assumption that it will give them community and mean that they'll be more comfortable in whatever else. It also, there very quickly starts this conversation of, just because, like, even though this is a queer space, or there's people who are part of a community here, doesn't mean they understand me, and doesn't mean that they're recognizing my gender identity, because ex-gendered people, which is what non-binary is in Japanese, or third-gendered people, isn't, I mean, even within the Western community, is still somewhat unrecognized. A lot of people don't necessarily understand it, and although and it causes some issues, and it causes some upset amongst various characters, but ultimately it does present an opportunity for all of these characters to learn and grow and to become more accepting and to widen their perspective on all fronts. It's really lovely, really sweet, kind of heart-wrenching a lot of the time, which I think, when it comes to any sort of coming-of-age story, can be really effective. Yeah, I haven't read all of this, so I can't say to the quality of all, like, the entirety of the story, but from majority of reviewers who are, especially non-binary reviewers or trans reviewers, they really relate to several of the characters in this, which I think is despite not being an own voice's work, is a testament to the representation to a certain extent. Obviously not every when it comes to identity and when it comes to representation, there's no one size fits all, especially when it comes to being non-binary and or gender fluid, because it's a very personal and fluid thing. But I think ultimately, overwhelmingly, there's been a lot of very positive reception for this series from the community that it is trying to represent, for the most part. Yeah, Love Me For Who I Am is really, really decent. It's not every day that we get non-binary representation whatsoever. So it's a solid step in more of that representation, and if you are looking for that, then I do recommend this one. I have a Kodansha series, and this one's just recently been released. I absolutely fell in love with it. I knew I would, from the premise and from everything that I'd heard about it, even prior to it being licensed. It's complete in 4 volumes, I believe. We only have one in English so far. But this is Boys Run the Riot by Keito Gaku. This is a wonderful story about a trans boy, teenage boy, who is FTM transgender, and is very uncomfortable with their current situation at school, because they hate the school uniform. It just pushes them to remember that, you know, they're not in a body that they're comfortable with, that is correct to their gender expression, and so is constantly uncomfortable with having to go to school, and is thus he takes every opportunity he can to kind of switch into the school tracksuit so he doesn't have to wear a skirt, and he's not out to anyone, but he's really into street fashion and clothes. And so he buys a lot of them, and is outside of school. He's obviously got a much more masculine wardrobe, but starting for the new school year, there's a new student who's kind of an old student, a guy who is repeating a year. He's a bit of an oddball, bit of a weirdo. He missed a lot of school, which is why, and has terrible grades, which is why he's repeating. But he is seated right behind our main character, and he's, not wanting to. He's trying to avoid this guy. Thinks he's a bit of a weirdo, But on their day off, or on the weekend, he goes out to a pop-up shop, and he's about to, for, a particular brand, he's about to reach for a t-shirt, and when doing so, he runs into this new classmate of his, and his classmate's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing, like, what are the odds? We should totally start a fashion brand together. And there's some things that pop up. Our main character, he's a very accomplished graffiti artist, so he's definitely got that street style, but this other kid, he's like, you should start a brand with me. I really think it's a good idea. I really, you obviously really care about the clothes that you wear, and this other guy, like this older student, isn't aware that at this point he just kind of assumes that this is a girl with very tomboyish fashion sense, and doesn't have any issue with that, like, no judgment there. But he's pushing him to join this, start a brand with him, which is a lot of work for one, but they're wanting to do this, and our main character's like, fine, like, sure, fine, okay. Again, drama happens, and he ultimately comes out to this other guy that, he feels like a guy. He's not a girl, he's a guy, and it really upsets him when people talk about him like he's a girl and blah blah blah, and to which our other main character is like, well, why didn't you say so? Cool, man, like, great, how am I supposed to know? Thanks for telling me. Like, we should still make this brand. So they're making this their own small boutique street fashion brand, which ultimately at the end of this book is named Boys Run the Riot, so which the series is named after, obviously. And man, this is so good. I really, again, I knew that I would like this, just from the premise. I've talked about my particular interest in fashion-focused series previously. Both my parents were in the fashion industry. It's something that's been a large part of my life for a very long time. They're no longer in the fashion industry, but that's how they met. So it's series that deal with fashion and the business side of clothing is always really interesting to me. I'm always up for a good story regardless of the gender of the characters. And of course, this is an Own Voices work. Keito Gaku is a trans man, and he's public about that in regards to this series and how he's pulled from his own experiences as well as friends and other people that he knows and put it into the series. I think this is a great one to spotlight because even amongst manga that deal with trans issues, there's not a lot of like trans masculine characters in there. It tends to be a lot more focused on trans girls and trans women, which is all like good. Yay, we love a trans lady, but it does mean that there is this kind of gap in the market. The only ones who really immediately come to mind are characters like from Wandering Sun, which has a very problematic ending in that regards, as well as Claudine, which was kind of the first trans male character in manga, but it is very dated, and is a tragedy, so not really a feel-good story. So it is nice to have this in English available. Yeah, this was phenomenal. I loved it. I cannot wait for volume 2. There is introduction for another trans character, whether they be genderqueer or trans woman, I don't know. We'll have to find out. Love them. They look great. It opens up some potential for more collaborators on this brand. They've already gotten some support from other people, and I think it's a really wonderful, the fashion, going back to the fashion element, obviously clothing is, for everyone, is a form of expression. But for trans people in particular, it's being able to wear something in a way that expresses how you feel, regardless of your gender, or to be more in line with gender expression is so important. But even like cisgendered people, there's certain fashions, there's certain styles that people feel like their more authentic self. Whether that be like a very punk rock or goth style, whether it be, very modest, buttoned up feeling, whether you only ever wear skirts, whether you only ever want to wear basketball shorts, whatever it is, clothing is such an important part of self-expression for everyone. But even more so for people who I think can gain a lot of gender euphoria from wearing clothing that is more in line with how they feel, right? So that aspect, I think, is just perfect for this series, and I hope future volumes are just as wonderful as this first one is. I also really want to highlight that this particular series, the entirety of the localization staff, translator, editor, letterer, are all trans in some shade. So that's really cool, and I really applaud Kodansha for that. It obviously also allows a bit more nuance, a bit more awareness, and care put into how it's translated, how things are phrased, how things are explained. And I think that's just really wonderful. I think it's just real. You can tell how much the team at Kodansha, how much love they put into this series. And I can only hope that it pays off for them, because it is really, really wonderful to see. It is a Square Enix book. This is an ongoing series, I believe, and that is I Think Our Son is Gay by Okura. Okura also has another LGBT manga put out by Viz, which is That Blue Sky Feeling. But this is a really sweet story about a mother who has, she thinks her son is gay. She has her suspicions. Her son is not very subtle about, he's not very thoughtful about staying closeted. He's still not comfortable with being out with his family. He hasn't admitted his sexuality one way or the other to his folks, and especially his dad. But as his mother, living with him, seeing him every day, talking with him, and having a real interest in his life, she's kind of pegged that her son is not straight. And her support, her quiet, not obvious support of him in that, and his younger brother as well, his kind of knowing that his brother is gay and he's not hiding it very well, but no one's going to say anything until he's comfortable saying something about it. But it's it's so lovely, and it's really nice to see a character who is supportive in ways that are like really subtle against microaggressions and homophobia, internalized homophobia as well, like this mother is. There's a lot of times where because of how trying to keep up the act of like, oh yes, no, I'm totally into girls, like when I get a girlfriend, sure, blah blah blah, and he'll slip up and say boyfriend, right? And he's like, I mean girlfriend. It's like, well, okay, whatever you say, it's fine either way. Oh yeah, like letting him get away with the ruse, but also kind of projecting and supporting him and letting her son know that, you know, at least with her, in her opinion, whatever he wants to, whatever makes him happy, she's happy. She just wants him to be his true self and to be able to be comfortable with himself as well. And it's just so sweet and cute and lovely. I also really liked that in the last chapter of this particular book, it kind of it shows her initial reaction to her suspicion that her son is gay, which is kind of shock and worry, and she calls her husband. It's like, because she finds some shirtless man magazines in her son's room, and she's like, no, actually, she finds him looking up some interesting things on the laptop, right? He didn't clear his history. Rookie mistake there. But she's kind of coming to this realization that her son's gay, right? And initially she's shocked and worried and kind of, I don't know if upset is quite the right word, but she calls her husband, all a fluster. But before she's like telling him what happens, in the prelude to that, she kind of reflects on that and her son and what's actually important to her, and she realizes that if he is gay, then that's not an issue. It's not something to be worried about. And so I think it in a really kind way, and also a really realistic way, it allows that acceptance to come, because people aren't perfect, and sometimes, especially the closest people to you, if something isn't obvious and it's kind of a bombshell dropped on you, it can be a shock. It can take a little while for people to adjust, and it might be a very quick adjustment period, but you can't inherently always assume that everyone's going to be like A-okay with everything and accepting right off the bat. And it's great when that it happens, right? But having that initial like shock or like, oh really, like, oh, or concern as well, before getting to that place of like, well, if you're happy, we're happy, we want the best for you. It doesn't mean that that person who had to go through that adjustment period is a bad person. It doesn't mean that their allyship is any less strong or relevant or valuable. And so, yeah, it's just really sweet and lovely, and cute, and I definitely recommend it. Also, interesting note, it has the same translator as Boys Run the Riot, the previous book that I just talked about, and is very good. I recommend them all. I recommend them all, but I recommend both of those especially. Those are just a few of the many, many wonderful LGBT manga that we've gotten over the last couple years that I would include as a recommendation if you're looking for particular titles to read this Pride Month. There are so many, I couldn't get into all of them, of course, and I also haven't read all of them, to be perfectly honest with you. So if there is a title that you love or that you would include on this list, or that you would make for your own lists, please leave a comment, and I will read those, or I'll read the comments and respond to them as best I can. Because there are so many good titles being released all the time now, and with every licensing event we do get more LGBT manga, whether it be Yuri, BL, or otherwise, and it's just so nice to see the broadening of the market, and the maturing of the market as well, getting more representation for some of the more marginalized identities like non-binary or gender fluidity, asexuality, and trans masculine characters too. It's just really, yeah, really cool. really cool. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful Pride, and have a wonderful all the rest of the time. Look after yourself, stay safe, stay healthy, look after the people you care about, And I will catch you in the next video, guys. Bye till then.